Before we begin the episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, Chin Up Goggles, the new generation of vision training. Its simplistic design eliminates downward vision, improving a player's spatial awareness, anticipation, skill acquisition and execution. The findings have been supported by scientific research in CIT, now MTU. Be sure to visit chinupgoggles.com for more. Welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you.
In episode 96, I'm glad to be joined by Westmeath senior hurling manager Joe Fortune. Joe has also had success managing Dublin club Ballyboden and underage Dublin hurling squads. This is a raw and honest interview where we learn about Joe's approach to coaching, creating setups and so much more. I hope you enjoy.
Hi Joe, thanks a million for joining me on the podcast.
All right, thanks for asking me. I've been promising I'd come on, I suppose, for a while, and I suppose I said I'd give me a shout in June, and the clock hadn't gone to 12 o'clock, and Cinderella was at the ringing me already. So I don't know what. But yeah, look, I'm delighted to come on. I just hope I can add something for people who listen.
Fantastic. Before we get into everything then, would you mind giving a quick kind of elevator pitch to the listeners who might not know who you are?
Yeah, look, I've been lucky enough to be involved in a number of really good setups. I managed the Dublin Minors in 2007, having been involved with the development squads for a number of years before that. And then moved on, did a little bit of work with DIT in Fitzgibbon, and moved on to take the Dublin 21s in 14 to 16. Again, won a Leinster final in 16, then spent 3 years in Ballyboden. Won a county final in 18, got to a Leinster final, a couple of leagues. And then I'm currently involved with the Westmeath senior hurling team. Just finished my first year.
Okay, brilliant. Who or what got you involved in coaching?
I suppose when you come to a point in your life where you realise your own playing career may not be as good as you'd like it to be. I didn't have a massive playing career myself, and I was actually doing, I played senior hurling in Dublin and, at home and that, but I was doing a master's in 2003, and I was driving home one wet evening, and I got a call. We had a couple of successful years in Oliver Plunkett's in the school that I work in Malahide. And we had a couple of successful years in coming to Munster competitions. And I remember I was halfway through a master's and coming home through Whitehall one night. I got a call from Declan Power, who was involved with the county board at the time with underage. They were just kind of initiating that whole underage development squad idea in Dublin at the time. And he asked me would I like to get involved with a 13 squad. And that's kind of where it started. Or like I was delighted to defer a master's. I said, geez, get me onto the pitch, lovely. But I remember at the time people saying to me that the group you're getting are not great, Joe. They're a nice group of young fellas, but I don't know how much potential is there in the group. But we'd love you to bring them forward. And look, yourself from dealing with underage teams, like the main aim is that you're providing players to go forward to the 21s and forward to the senior team. So took it on board with a lady called Emer Dignam at the time, a good friend of mine. And over the course of those 3 or 4 years, then ended up kind of going through 13s, 14s, where kids were happy enough to get a can of Coke and a Mars bar in Ballymun after training on a Saturday morning to, I suppose, in that 4 or 5 years to see how everything just changed and how we immersed an awful lot of ourselves and time into it. And that group that we were told were very average ended up being not a bad bunch. We won a minor final in 2007 against, I remember we played Wexford. Even like if internally within the group, and I know this is probably just developing on from your question, but even internally in the group, I remember at the time a parent saying to us after the minor semi-final against Wexford, where I'm from, we played them down in Dr. Cullen. And I remember one of the parents saying just at the end, going, look, that was a great performance, but like you won't keep the ball poked out to Kilkenny. There was so much doubt around Dublin hurling at the time, and we went and played Kilkenny in the minor final and beat them by 10 points. Like, the first time Dublin had beat a team of that significance in Croke Park, possibly in a long time, And yeah, look, I love what I'm doing now. I got involved at a young enough age. I was 28 or 29, I think, when I managed that minor team in Croke Park. And again, probably going along the lines of I hadn't had an exemplary playing career. And I suppose the moment I kind of felt that, let's shelve that idea and move on to management, that probably became a little bit more beneficial for myself and for other people too, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's actually come up a couple of times. It's kind of, and I think as well, if you're trying to do both, it's very, very difficult. Like I'm playing in a very low level, and I find it hard to try to balance training to get to coaching or whatever. But I'm actually interested with Emer got involved very early. I suppose that it's kind of the women in sport kind of factor is kind of come in a lot. You don't see a huge amount of women involved in intercounty setups, particularly maybe going back to kind of that 03 stage. It was, I'm not saying that there's nothing to do against Emer, but from the peripheries and kind of looking from women in sport eyes and things, Emer would have got it involved quite early, and probably something when this wasn't really done, that when women were involved in setups.
Yeah, and I think it surprises me at times, if I'm being honest, Orla, why? Because I ask myself, even since I suppose my last involvement with Emer was in 16 when we won a Leinster title with Dublin, got beaten after extra time by Galway. I asked myself the question why at times she's not involved in another capacity within the Dublin setup. Like myself and Emer go back, probably to 02, 03. Does it surprise me that she was involved? It's absolutely not. Like she came from a family that's immersed in sport. Like her dad, was one of the main guys in the Ross over the course of the years. Her own family, I know her. She had an uncle who won an All-Ireland with Dublin. Like massively proud. Vincent's family, like really immersed in GAA in Dublin, and she has a massive job in Dublin GAA circles as well, like in coordinating all the coaches. It surprises me at times because I see what Emer brought to our setup, and I suppose she brought that personal care. She brought the ability and the standards. There was no stone left unturned in regards to her preparation as well. Like, and I suppose somebody had to be called the Bonister, or somebody had to wear that bib. And I suppose when I worked with Emer and Dwayne in those development squads, it was very much where we worked together. I was the face that fronted the cameras maybe at times, but somebody had to take, I suppose that leadership role. But I've no doubt that I think when you're getting any management team together and you notice yourself from being involved, I think you surround yourself with good people. People who don't have an ego, people who are going to be good for what you want to do. And from all the time I've worked with Emer in Dublin circles, she's been somebody who the players would speak very highly of, and maybe gave a different point of view on areas at the time that we were looking at from a coaching and from a mindset point of view. And mindset wasn't really something that was spoken about in 03, 04, 05 up to 07. And everybody has a mindset coach now. And I suppose my point on Emer being that as time progresses, I feel there will be a massive need and want for female coaches in setups, not for any other reason except for their own personal ability, and not as a token gesture. I think people that are out there that are interested in any element of sport, there's no reason why in any capacity that it can't be male or female. It probably goes back to even, a lot of people ask me, does it bother me at times that, that you didn't have, a playing career that's as conducive to success as people you come up against. Like I've come up, it's mad sometimes, like when you stand on the sideline. I remember in 07, that minor team being down in Carlow and playing against Wexford, like I said, where I was from, and my dad sitting up in the stand, but looking down the line and seeing the management team they had, it was Liam Dunn, Billy Byrne, Tom Dempsey, George O'Connor, like people who I grew up idolizing. And I was the person that was coming up against your proverbial heroes. It never bothers me. I think it bothers other people. I think you have to work harder. I think you have to work harder for people to trust that you're going to create a setup that's going to be conducive to high performance. But going back to the Emer thing, it's the same thing. I think it bothers other people more. I think sometimes you might just have to work harder to get what you want. Like, is the real quick fix the big name in a setup? You bring, you can see the headline yourself, pick a name, any name, and it's coming to Dublin hurling or Westmeath hurling or Ballyboden hurling, whatever it might be. Is it a quick fix? Is it an ego? Or is it a case where you get the best people involved? And just because the person becoming involved doesn't have that illustrious name behind them, I don't think it matters as much. From what I've been involved in, luckily enough, like I said, I've been involved with really good teams, really good club teams and county teams, and we've had success, relative success at times, but success conducive enough to making sure that I know when I go into a job, I'm going to make sure that I do it right and do it to the best of my ability as well, without the name.
Yeah, that's actually something I was going to ask you about. It's interesting to get your perspective on it. Do you think that's maybe hindered your coaching career a little bit, that you don't have the the playing resume to back it up and say, well, I played, you know, X, Y, and Z, and I won this and that. Do you think, and as well, is there too much focus on kind of getting this big name in? You know, maybe sometimes you see it that, you know, it might be their first coaching job, maybe not their first coaching job, but they're the big name coming in, and it doesn't really work out in the end because, you know, maybe they're not the right fit, but they had the big playing days behind them.
Yeah, like it's a really good question. I suppose it depends. Like when you get involved in a setup from the beginning, I suppose you have to have an ambition and a name. And depending where you're coming from a football or a hurling or a basketball or whatever type of setup you're getting involved in, there's an ambition and a name in any setup. And if that is, I just find sometimes that it's not something that ever bothered me personally. Is it a reason why maybe other opportunities haven't happened? Possibly it has been at times. But I would always be conscious of saying that any setup that I've been involved in, I like to surround myself with better people, both from a coaching and, you know, development and from a mindset point of view. I think when you're getting a team together, it comes back to that old saying, you know, nobody will remember really what you did, or nobody will really remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I think any setup that I've been involved in, you know, I don't put my hand up and say that I'm the greatest hurling analyst in the world, but I surround myself with people who really are. I've made mistakes in management setups and getting managements together. I've learned from them, but I never leave a stone unturned when it comes to getting a team prepared. And anything that I can get out of a team, I'll get it done. Does that mean that I suppose that a big name will do better? I think it's a short-term fix, if I'm being honest, Orla. I think when it comes down to some teams, I think you go in, you find out what you want to do, you look at the setup that you want to have, you look at the aims and the usual. I'm sure that you've heard it all before. You look at where you want to go as a team, you know, where are you going to find that edge? What are you going to do as a management setup? And I just think at times, the name and the ego can step in the way of maybe where the team wants to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. I got a couple of questions from someone we both know. I want to ask you about kind of treating the players.
Can I ask who the person is? No.
Yeah, no, it's staying anonymous. Something that I particularly try to do with my own coaching, and I know you do it as well, is treating the player as an individual and not just seeing them in the jersey and seeing them as the Westmeath hurler, the number 7, the cornerback, the full forward, whatever it is. How did you develop that? It obviously came from somewhere. Was that something you always had, that kind of emotional intelligence, or was it maybe from your playing days? How did you kind of bring that approach into the setup, into your coaching? Because I suppose I like to attribute that to my playing days, that I know what it feels like to be a player, and that's why I treat my players the way I would like to be treated.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the big thing for me is, you know, I've got 3 questions that I ask myself a lot in all aspects of life, but particularly when I get involved with a team. Like when times are tough on and off the pitch, who's going to back you? Okay, that's the first question I'd always ask myself. So if you have a team and things are going well, everybody taps you on the back, you know, and you're a great man, and you know you're a great manager, and you're this, and then my dad would always have said to me, you know, that tap on the back is only kind of 6 inches from a kick in the arse. And on the dark days, then who's going to be the person that's going to be beside you, you know? And I find sometimes that the second one I'd always say is, if you're taken off in a game or something happens bad in a game, will it be about you or will it be about the team? So is this something that you become obsessed with just yourself, or is it about the team? And the last one then kind of is similar to the first. It's kind of a Navy SEALs kind of an idea. The most important people in the Navy SEALs life are the people behind them, because if the first man goes, the next person is up. And where I got my emotional, I suppose, the big thing for me is outside of white lines. I think if you want a team to go to a place with you, to go to that dark place in a game, I probably saw it in 18 with Boden. You know, we'd so many extra times. Actually, we played more extra times than we did normal time for some of the games. But I just felt from any of my coaching or management, when you show people that you care and that you genuinely care, you get more out of them. It's probably, as much as it's a great asset as a manager, it's probably your biggest fault sometimes, because you've got 30 developing individuals, and you become nearly obsessed with trying to make them better people as well as better hurlers. And I think people see through spoofers. I think any team that I've been in, one of the first things that I address when I go into a team meeting is that if I'm going to become part of a journey and I'm going to become part of a team, and then I'm part of it. And that'll end on the last day, but for the time that I'm there, the importance of family, of life, of what you do outside of work, how you're feeling. Like if Orla's coming to training to me and I wanted to become an elite athlete, I need to know where Orla's coming from. I need to know about her folks. I need to know about, where she's from, what she works at, her relationships. And I think it comes back to maybe where probably my own family as well. Like that, like I saw how hard my dad worked for us when we were kids. We didn't have, like I live in Malahide now. I'm lucky I've got 3 great kids, and I live in a lovely area, but I probably saw how hard my dad had to work for us and how everything was just normalized. It didn't matter who came into our house as a friend, everybody was treated the same. And for me, when I got involved in management, it really made me think that if I want to be better, because I don't have the background, or I didn't have the illustrious playing career, if I want to get involved with this Dublin setup or Westmeath setup or Ballyboden setup, the players that are there need to know that, Joe Fortune cares outside of the circle. And look, I've been lucky enough for it. I don't take the praise for the setups that I've had. I've been lucky enough to have really good people around me. And if I've impacted players along the way in a positive sense outside of the game of hurling, it's nearly worth more. I had a really good sports performance coach with us involved this year, a guy called Shane O'Sullivan from Ballygunner. And he spoke one day to us. It just really resonated with me as a person, because I think when you're involved in management, you have to care about the players outside of the white lines. And what he said was, he spoke about his own father passing away a couple of years ago, and how he sat in the room and he watched him take each of his last breaths. And it's a phrase or a saying that will stay with me for as long as I'm involved with teams. Like when you're at that last day, and when you're just about, when his father was just about to leave this earth, what really matters in life is who you've loved and who loves you at the very end. It doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter how many playing days you had, doesn't matter how many men, but like who you really cared about and who cares about you. And whatever setup that I've been involved, I'm lucky enough still that I have a massive positive relationship with the lads I had in 07 as a minor team. Like PK with me now as a coach. I had him as a kid, giving out to him for going to electric picnic or falling out of trees as a 16 or 17-year-old. And now he's an all-star. And, even going back to the comment by the parent, you won't keep the ball poked out to Kilkenny. Like we had, I think maybe 7 or 8 of that team that went on to play senior hurling for Dublin, So answering the question, where does it come from? I think a lot of it comes from the fact that of where I came from, that we had to work hard in order to get what we wanted to do, and to realize that there were going to be good and bad days. But if you turned around and the person was behind you on the bad days, it meant an awful lot more. I remember just last one, because I tend to.
No, I'm actually really liking the stories. You go ahead.
Like I come in this year, like we had a couple of massive days with Westmeath this year, like really, really proud days. And I came in after losing the Carlow game in the league, and there was only 2 messages on my phone. I picked up my phone, I looked at my phone, and there was 2 messages. One was from Annalisa, my wife, and one was from my dad. And it's funny because I came in after Wexford, I think there was 160. I came after the Laois match, there was 200. And I always go back to, I always refer to the people who back you on the dark days are the people who you want by your side. And I would try and do that and explain that to players as we go on, that there will be great days and you lift Leinster trophies, but on the day where you're sitting at home and you don't feel yourself, can I still pick up the phone to Joe Fortune, or will it just be on a hurling term? That would be a huge thing for me.
I love that. How do you start that with a team, and particularly maybe when a new player comes in that maybe they're new to the setup, but the lads have been there before. Like something I probably struggled with at the beginning with my group is trying to develop that relationship, probably through a lack of confidence and experience with myself. But how do you start that with a player? Because sometimes they might not be used to it. They might be, used to kind of, let's say, the old school approach where people only care about Joe Fortune, the hurler. They don't really care about the teacher, the father, the brother, anything else.
That's brilliant. I think the big thing from the beginning with me is about respect. So Orla goes into her team for the first time, her first team meeting with her new team, and the word respect has to be the primary one. And I think that goes for the person who's the manager, if it's me, to the person who opens or closes the gate in Parnell Park or Cusick Park. The respect has to resonate down. I think for a group and a team to be successful, be it on the pitch or off the pitch, respect has to resonate from the group to everybody. So I know there's chat at times about the Dublin footballers and how they leave dressing rooms, and but we were doing that in 03. I would be conscious that when you go into Parnell, or even now when I go into Cusack Park, that it shouldn't be Keith, or it shouldn't be whatever picking up the slitters at the end. It should be the players. It should be the person who delivers your meals should be treated the same way as the manager. And in order for that culture to kind of establish itself, I think the word trust is really important. I think the first word I'd be putting up are two words: ego and trust. Ego just can destroy a group. It can manifest in players. It can manifest in a player group or in a management team. But the trust and respect element for me is massive. And it depends on. I go back always to, and I've said this a million times over the course of this year, even people see through bluffers, Orla. People will realize that. I listen to podcasts, and I at times driving up the road, people say, is the traveling hard? And I remember Dalo saying to me when he was involved with Dublin, you get so much work done when you're on the road. And I find I get a chance to ring home or ring one of my coaches, or, I get to chat to my mum and dad for a while, and then I might throw on a podcast. Not always yours now, but I throw on the odd podcast here and there.
Only mine.
but what you get sometimes is you actually sit in the car sometimes, you go, he doesn't really mean that. She doesn't. I know what he's like outside of the game, and I think at times people see through that. And I think for me, from the beginning, building the trust, creating a bond, it's all about that word respect. If the player, like I've got a kit man with me, Key Quinn. I remember Dalo actually when he was with Dublin talking about Ray Finn, who was in his book. You'll find it in his book. He was his kit man, logistics man, whatever the term is that the person likes to use at the time, but.
Kitchen sink.
Yeah, the person who does the stuff outside that nobody else sees. And I remember Dalo talking about Ray saying that if he was to have an operation in the morning, even though Ray has no medical background, he'd want Ray to do the operation because Ray was just so meticulous with his prep. And I found myself, I've had Liam with Dublin, I've Keith with, you have to have that. You have to have people around you who the players have respect for, and you'll have arguments. And I think the same as any other relationship in the world, if you don't have an argument, it's not worthwhile being in the relationship at all. But it's all about the team and it's all about respect. And the person who comes in with the dinner, or the person who locks the gate in Cusack Park or Parnell Park, some of my best relationships still are with those people. It's not necessarily with. I prefer to go on my own and go off away from the good days. Even I prefer to be with the people who are in the background are doing the work when nobody else sends the text, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, no, I like that. And I like the way you mentioned who's with you on the dark days, like, because that's when you really find out who your true backers are. Was there someone that, like, even when you mentioned picking up the slitters, cleaning the dressing rooms, you would have been doing that from 03. That's probably before this big kind of phenomenon. I think 2017 was the year, was it, Cluxon was sweeping the dressing room, kind of. Where does that come from? Is there anything you've picked up from your playing days? Like, where does this start from for you? Where did you pick it up? Or is it just learning along the way where you say, this works well, I'm going to try this. Geez, this is now really vital for me and my setup?
I think no matter what you do in life, I think if you want to be good at something, you have to be consistent. And I think you start off doing something, like I'm a teacher, obviously that's what I do. And a good friend of mine would say, like, if you don't like cars, you wouldn't become a mechanic, and if you don't like people or kids, you wouldn't become a teacher. And I suppose what I'm in from a day-to-day point of view, even in my own classes, I use I use this kind of term with kids sometimes, but the 3 H's, hard work, honesty, and human. And that probably comes from my home life again, that, if you're going to be good at something, you have to work hard. You really have to work hard at it. In regards to being honest, it's like when a kid comes to school, like if they come to school and they don't have their homework done, just be honest and say, look, I didn't do my English because, or I didn't do my Irish because. And the respect kind of resonates from that, or comes from that. And the same in sport, like if you're really honestly putting as much as you can into something, and you're working as hard as you can, then for me, that's as much as you can do. But the third one is probably the most important one, the human element. And the human element for me is everybody makes mistakes. Like, if you talk about the standards and where people come from, like I had Rory O'Carroll, Johnny Cooper, 2 lads who went on and won, All Irelands with Dublin football wise, in 03, getting ready for that minor setup. But that came from them. It didn't always come from me. Like it came from, it comes from your family. It comes from where you are from. And can you help somebody? Absolutely. Is a manager there to provide an environment where that blossoms and grows? Yeah, but I think families need to take credit. Clubs need to take credit for the type of kids they send out to Westmeath or to Dublin. I can remember the most important thing at under 14 or under 15 level with that Dublin team was there was a lady, a mum of one of the players, Peter Buckridge, and his mum used to come up to the bus door with Mars bar cake she made the night before every day, and that was the most important thing to the kids at the time. But it was always, thank you, respect, and I don't take credit. I think you can have an environment like that, but I think the clubs and the people behind the scenes in regards to parents and minders and stuff, they need to take credit for a lot of that as well. I think we're only there to insist on that element of trust and honor and maturity and human in a setup. But I give the families an awful lot of credit for that as much as I would management teams.
Okay, interesting. For the players you've mentioned you've worked with over the years, particularly through the development ages, can you tell from some of the players at an early age that now a bit of luck comes into it, I think, as well when you're not injured, but can you tell from early age when some of them are really destined to have success on and off the pitch?
Yeah, you can. I think you can spot the good players, the great players, very early. And I suppose I'm lucky enough now where I've been involved in I suppose people said to me with underage teams, unless you went to get involved with a senior team or with a men's team, you may not end up where you'd love to be or where you'd like to be or whatever. And I remember after 16, after the 21s setup finished, getting involved with Boden. And it was so obvious when I went there that idea that, the great players are just willing to do what others can't do or want to, and I got an opportunity in Boden to work with really, really honest, hard-working guys who had been there with Dublin over the course of the years. A lot of people said they were finished. They were an older team at the time. But the great players, as a manager, you see, they're just willing to do the small things consistently right all of the time. They always find that way. They don't look for excuses. Like I was lucky. I had a captain, I suppose, my general in ways, in Simon Lambert out there for the couple of years that I was there. And like, I couldn't speak higher of him as a person, as a leader. Always outworked, always outtaught opponents. Maybe at times didn't have, he'd give out to me for saying this, but maybe didn't have the same, maybe people said he didn't have the same pace or the same abilities he had at younger, but by Jesus, there wasn't a day he backed down for me. They inspire people like that, people like the Shane Durkins, Conal Keeney's, they inspire people around them. And they kind of, you can see that in order for them to get as good as they were, they just didn't take shortcuts, and I had a group there, like I said, I knew a lot of them going out to Ballyboden. And, when you look at a team that's made up with David Curtins and Niall McMurrows and Finn McGarry's and all as well, it was always going to be something that it was an elite group. And I suppose to answer your question, I knew before I went out there that this was a group that you could really bring to something with success. And I suppose when you go into a new environment, maybe it takes a while for you to see that. But from an underage perspective and from a managed perspective, yeah, great players they just do what others are not willing to get involved in. They just go, they don't make excuses. And they're also not easily managed, if that makes sense. The great players are the ones who question. And I've been involved with managements, with coaches at times who felt it wasn't right that players were allowed to ask questions or felt that it was questioning management, but I love that. And the Westmeath lads will tell you this year, like there was times before some of the games that there was real conversation, the players saying, well, why should I do this? Or why do you want me to do this? And it led to really productive, an environment where people weren't afraid to ask questions. And I think the robotic nature has gone out of hurling now, in fairness to John Kiley and teams that have come, Jim Gavin, they had environments where it was a player-led environment. And I know I'm going a little bit off the topic, but for me as a manager, can you see the difference between high-end players at a young age? Yes, you can. Does it mean that somebody at a young age won't progress? No, absolutely not. Like, look, everybody uses the kind of story or the analogy of Henry Shefflin not playing underage for Kilkenny. That can always happen. But at some stage, I suppose somebody would have had to see or had a bit of belief in that player in order for them to kind of to push on. But yeah, look, I've been lucky. I've had some of the great players in Dublin. I've had an opportunity. I think we played Dublin this year. And I think maybe 9-10 of that starting team came under me at some stage. And even in Westmeath, like when you look at Tommy Doyle and you know, Angus Clark, Killian Doyle, some of those real leaders that are on that team as well. They don't take second best. They consist. Even Davy Glennon, you know, he's not officially from Westmeath, but the standards that he looks for, Niall O'Brien, like they're all really, Niall Mitchell, they're all guys who they don't take substandard setups. They want setups that are conducive to them progressing.
Mm-hmm. That's something that came up with Tom Ellen's under 16 girls soccer coach, Irish soccer team, and the Irish assistant, and he said the best players want to be coached, and I think sometimes maybe at underage we nearly shy away from the best players, like, well, she has it or he has it, whereas they actually really want to be coached. And sometimes I find there's a couple of players that push me to be better because they're pushing me to improve them, and sometimes I need to improve to be able to improve them. It's like, but I 100% understand when coaches don't want to be questioned because, you know, maybe sometimes they're not used to it, but as a player it's you're just trying to develop yourself and develop the group. And
yeah, but the coaches you can't go to, like, if you're trying to put a certain type of game plan or mantra within a team, you don't cross the white line. As good as you are, like, your job stops at the white line. They bring it on, Orla. And the big thing for me is, like, so many players want it to happen and they talk about it happening and they wish it would happen, but the real guys make it happen. And that's what I've seen over my experience with Dublin and with Boden and with Westmeath this year. Like, I can have the greatest setup, the best management, the best coaches, but when it crosses the white line, it's down to the players. And, like, in order for them to understand fully what you want them to do, they have to be allowed to ask questions. And the coach who comes in barking and shouting and doesn't allow you have or want you to have that relationship is a spoofer, really, is a journeyman, and will move on to the next team and won't really care. And I'd wonder how successful they can be at times as well, you know.
how do you balance the benefit of, let's say, for myself versus the overall group, while still trying to focus? I think it's fascinating. Like, it's how do you manage the 35 individual players while still trying to manage and benefit the entire group at the same time?
I think for me, everything is about team, you know, and I often talk about, like, everyone uses the analogy of the apples, and if you have somebody in your group who's not happy, it can fester, you know. And I think we spoke earlier on about the importance of everybody in the group and the respect that goes from the players to management and so on. But, you know, there is that, and I'm trying to remember who said it, and I can't remember the full phrase properly, but the way a team plays as a whole determines success. So it's not about the people that start a match. You can have all the best players in the world, but if you don't play together and you don't play as a team, then you're not worth anything, right? That's a huge thing for me. And when you're injured or when you're not playing, you need to be as important to the manager as your centre forward or your midfielder. And I suppose it's something that I think when you have a backroom team together, nearly one of the most important people, or some of the most important people, are your physios, because they're the people who are on the table with Orla, and Orla's feeling down on herself because she's not involved, she's not in the group. You know, they're the people who feed that information back to you. And me making a call to Orla on the way home might mean 10 times more than what it'll mean to the centre forward who's starting the following week. And I suppose that comes down to management, and it comes down to understanding, comes down to players, comes down to body language. You know, I like to be around, you know, if we're training in, you know, Cusick Park or Parnell Park or wherever in Boden, I'd like to see myself there at least an hour beforehand, because you have the people who turn up early to want to do things, but you might just have Orla turning up sometimes who just wants to feel a bit important, you know. And I think from my point of view, like, again, I go back to, I've probably seen setups and been involved in setups where the manager walks into the dressing room 10 minutes before training starts and is in the car before the players are even off the field. Again, I don't think that's conducive to making sure everybody's important. I think if it's a player-led environment as well, or I think sometimes that the players would see an issue. So my captains, and I've picked captains on the basis of not only are they good players, but they understand the group. And I would hope a captain will come to me and say, listen, whatever, if it's Orla is a bit down on herself, you know, you might need to have a chat. If the physio might come to me, I'd have people in my group who would be sounding you out to make sure that even though you are injured, that you're finding a role for Orla as well. Like, is it a long-term injury that she has or he has? And, you know, is there something like I've said this in front of the players this year. We had a guy this year, probably nothing wrong with mentioning, but with Tommy Gallagher, had a shoulder injury. He was the fullback for Westmeath last year. That guy bleeds Westmeath blood out through and through, but he was injured probably just after we won the National League. A shoulder injury, a training one night, which meant he was going to miss the whole Leinster Championship, right? And this was the first time that Westmeath were going to kind of be part of that round robin in Leinster. But he was with my stats guy then for the next couple of games, just as a role or a job for him to do. Or I could sell the commentary from the videos. Like, he is the most passionate, clued in fella. Especially in the Wexford game, like, I'd nearly switch it off sometimes and listen to his commentary, because he's sitting beside my stats and he's dry. He's hitting every ball with the players. He's not Mr. I'm not playing. And he's like, move the ball fast, get it to hand. He was actually every kind of sporting template that we spoke about as a team, he was vocalizing it to the group. And it made me think that even when somebody, number 34, number 35 are injured, there's always a role in every setup for people. Because if not, why have you got them there? I don't believe in training fodder. I prefer the lads playing with their clubs and staying with their clubs rather than just being in a Westmeath setup or a Dublin setup when they're not really useful. Are they a young player who's going to make it? Or are you just there? Like, if you're in a county setup for 3 or 4 years and you're not making it, I think you need to look in the mirror. Like, I think you need to, and I think the manager needs, some people say, well, how do you deal with hard conversations? I don't really see conversations being difficult or hard. I think, if you tell the person the truth, you have nothing to remember. If you can go, if Orla comes to me or a player comes to me and asks me, why am I not playing, or why am I not in the 26? If I tell them the truth, then I don't have to remember a lie down the line. But you told me a few weeks ago, and I don't see them as tough conversations. Honesty, what's your role? What's your job? What do I expect you to do? Did you do it? Did you not? And I'm also hugely, from the time I had some of the development squads, I'm a huge believer in, like, we had Jim Gavin in with us a few times, who was really good to us when we had the Dublin 21s. And he got me really thinking about that whole idea of starters and finishers in a team and how the game has changed. And you might be one of the better players, but you might not start on the team. But if you're really about the team, you might understand your role when you come in. And I don't think any team that I've had would have been successful as they were if I didn't have that kind of role for people. They have to understand it. There's no point in Orla being pissed off on the line. She needs to understand, I'm coming in for a significant part of this. I'm coming in to finish the game, or I'm on the field to stop a player, or I've got a man marking role, whatever it might be. But I don't do hard conversations. I just do truth ones. And like I said, the more honest you are with players, I think the more they respect you as well.
I love that. You're like a pro. You've already answered. How do you manage those conversations? How do you deal with, let's say, for example, you need me as a finisher, and I'm not happy with that role, and probably my ego's coming into it. I'm not used to I'm used to being the starter. I'm used to being the star player. How do you deal with the ego getting in the way of not only the team improving, but the individual as well?
Very, very simply, when I go in, one of the words, and you talk about, when you go in, be it a slideshow or whatever you're showing to players on the first time you meet them, one of the first words I'll use in the group is ego. I've made that mistake. I don't put management teams together or backroom teams together based on ego or based on their own playing career or based on their own coaching history. I put them based on together what I feel is the right for the group of players that we're coming to manage or to get to make better. I think ego, there's kind of two sides to the question. I don't deal with ego. If you have an ego and it's bigger than the team, I don't want you part of it. Simple. And that might be the hard conversation that people might talk about. I feel from my perspective that everybody in training is as important as each other. So you talked about the 34, 36, everybody's treated the same. Yes, there's days where you're in bad form, or you might not be in that place where you see the positive side of the team, but everybody's made feel as important. And I think for me, you sit down with, and look, there's a few that come to mind, a few significant players that come to mind, but I explain the role, I explain why. I allow them have their moment or hissy fit or whatever it might be. I'll probably follow it up with a call the next day. Do you understand who I spoke to you about? And then if I feel that it's not going to work, Orla, then they're not the person that comes in. Like, I think in the environments that I've been lucky enough to be involved in now, a person understands the role, they understand what you want them to get, and they may have been a big player for a previous manager, or they may have been a big player for a previous setup. But this is the setup that I'm running now. And ask yourself the question, why Joe sees you as this as well. And maybe over the course of time, could that change for year 2 or year 3? Absolutely. But based on what the team have available to us, like I can remember Keane Boland with the under 21s, like probably the best player I had, in many ways. And he was seen as because Keane was carrying an injury at the time, he hadn't got 60 minutes in him at that level. So we had to find the right time. It was the right time in the madness and the warfare of the first 15 minutes, or was it, and it was hard to tell Keane that at times. And he's gone on to have a really good career with Dublin so far. And after a tough year this year, I'm sure he'll push on. The same goes, look, for many players, I probably won't name too many of them because they'll probably give out. But I just see there's a significant role for the people that come onto a field. And it's not just a token gesture. I think the days are gone, especially in elite performance levels. The days are gone where you're looking over your shoulder going, Jesus, who am I going to bring in now? You should have an idea. Like I had Eddie Casey with us this year, and I suppose Paul O'Donoghue and himself would have worked quite well. We would have known nearly at what point and for what reason we were bringing people in. And that's something I think that's important, that you don't just turn up on the day. And I think the players, if you're a sub, you need to know, am I going to have an impact? And if I am, what do you want me to do? And what do you expect me to do? And the parameters of that would have been set out very clearly in the last couple of setups that I would have been involved in. Absolutely.
Of everything we've spoken about, I can even tell, after conversations, you ring the players, you're ringing management on the way home. You're always thinking, at senior intercounty level, is management, is it an obsession? Is it just this, can you switch off at all during the year?
Look, it's great when Orla or people, similar people, sing your praises and for what you've done, and people talk about Joe Fortune as a manager. It's great to hear it at times. I know myself that I'm constantly looking for that extra percent. I find it hard. It becomes your life if you care about it, no matter what job you do. I think soft mindsets kind of lead to soft habits, lead to soft players, lead to soft managers, lead to soft performances. I find that myself. And I do find it hard at times to switch off from it. I suppose we spoke just off air coming on, like I've been 4 weeks now away from the Westmeath setup, doing a little bit of work in the background about, sitting down with players and county boards to look at year 2 and what might need to change and so on. But it's something I find it hard to switch off from when I'm immersed in it. But over the last couple of weeks, like, there's only so much Love Island and that kind of stuff you can kind of see in a room, So I'm looking forward to being involved in some capacity soon, because it does become your life. Look, I've got 3 girls, 3 little kids, and a very understanding wife who know well what I'm like when I get involved in a project. But they also know, I suppose, that I wouldn't do something unless I felt it was the right thing to do. And it does become your life. It does become an obsession to a form as well, but a really enjoyable one too. And I suppose the teams that I've been involved in, luckily enough, have had success or relative success, depending on your outlook on things. But yeah, switching off. I don't overly celebrate good days, to be honest. If I'm genuine, I can picture 18. We won a county final in Boden. Hadn't won one in whatever 5 years. I drove out to the club that night. I came up against Dalo, who'd been really good to me in a Dublin point of view. But I was home by probably 12:30, thinking about Clonkill the following week. I don't do the same way as, I suppose, you have to allow the low moments not get you too low, but the high moments not get you too high. I don't over celebrate anything. I remember actually in 2016, we beat Wexford in Wexford Park. The year that we won the Leinster final, and there was pictures up on Sportsfile immediately after games, like of and Dublin hadn't beaten Wexford down there. We'd found it hard over the couple of years that I was with the 21s. I remember John Costello after 15 ringing and just explaining that he wanted me back, and we just lost in the last minute to Kilkenny in Parnell Park. And it meant a lot when your county secretary or chairman picks up the phone and wants you back after losing in the last minute Kilkenny. We put a massive amount of work into 16. I remember going down to Wexford Park. Of course, it was always Wexford we were drawn against. I don't know, it was like a magnet for me. But we went down and they'd beaten us, and in the 14 final, and we went down in 16 and beat them in Wexford Park, like an amazing performance. But there was pictures on Sportfile, like I said, and coming back on the bus, I got a message for Johnny Cooper. I'd still be quite close with Johnny at times. And it was a picture of the lads, like just with their arms around each other at the end of the match, as most people do. And it was just a text with that picture saying, reground those lads now. And it was, maybe he got it from me, I don't know, but he was constantly thinking about what's next. And I think for me, like I look for small percentages. I do switch off, like I said, with the kids. We have a 3-year-old little girl, probably a 3.5. She likes to say a little girl called Faye. And because of COVID and how life changed in those 2 years, I got to spend an awful lot of time at home. She grounds me a lot. She's asked me a couple of times over the last, you're not going to Mullingar, Dad? I said, no, that's an iPad. So I do switch off family-wise. I do 100% agree with your question. I think if you care about a project and you want it to get to the next level, there has to be an element of obsession there. I think once you get a bit soft in your mindset, that resonates itself down into the team as well.
I love that. And I love the way you said you don't get too high with the highs, you don't get too low with the lows. That's actually something I had a conversation with a player the other week, and the problem was she was getting too high at the highs, too low at the lows. And when she got in the lows, it's great when everything's going well, but when things are not going well, it can be a dark place for a player. And it's trying to remember, yes, you celebrate, but it's, you can't celebrate too much, because then it's the swing will go the other way.
Yeah, but like I probably told a little bit of a white lie there when you said that back to me. I definitely don't celebrate the highs. As much as I probably should, or enjoy them as much as I could. Like even the league final this year, coming home, seeing what it meant to the people in Westmeath, beating Wexford on the pitch, like grown men, like 70, 80-year-old men coming up to me, like with their tears streaming down their face. It was the greatest day and it was really touching. This year against Laois, the county finals, like I probably don't enjoy them as much. I do find myself on the dark days that I'm not, I'm probably not the nicest person to be around for a couple of days. If I have a chance to fix it, I found that actually a bit easier this year, because when you lose another 21 matches, you're gone. It's over, right? The kind of setup that it is. I know Munster changed this year, but and minor, when we had the minors as well, or we got one shot with that minor team and it was knockout. Whereas now the minors tend to have 5 matches or 4 matches, where I found that easier, because if something happens, like if you're in a setup, like you have a semi-final or whatever coming up now, you get one chance to win that. That's it. And there's no backdoor, there's no, and I found that a little bit easier. But I'm also a good friend of mine would always say about how some people look at life as like the seasons of the year, right? And it's great. Everybody wants it to be spring. Everything's growing. The lambs are jumping around the field. Everything's, everyone's in good form. You're coming into summer, the sun is shining. But autumn and winter inevitably come. And they are coming. No matter how good your days are, autumn and winter are going to come. But then when you're in that autumn or winter, you just need to realize that spring will happen again. Like, the light will shine again. And the big thing for me is when the dark days come, you have to have strong people around you, like I said earlier on. And my wife's not too bad now at resetting me after. She gave me 2 days maybe to feel sorry for myself. Even after Leinster final in 18, I found it hard to see that 18 years success at the time after losing the Leinster final. And people were saying, like, you're mad. Like, you won it. We had 11 matches in Dublin in the league. We won 10 and drew 1 and won the league. We won every match in championship in Dublin. We beat Clonkill, we beat Coolderry, and we lost to Ballyhale in the Leinster final. And I remember it took me 2 or 3 days to see any sort of light in it. So maybe a little bit of a white lie earlier. I need to learn, if you were asking me, what do you have to improve on? That's what I need to improve on myself. That kind of sense of, with the dark days come the good days, but you need the honest people around you there. And I've got a group probably, Orla, of 3 or 4 people, like a real mixed bag of people who I would bounce things off that have no emotional attachment to the setups that I'm in. And I pick up the phone maybe to one of them, or I might get a message from one of them saying, it's time to look back at what you've done now and move on. And one or two guys in particular who were brilliant to me, away from my own circle of friends that are just honest, good people in business and in life. And when you bounce things off people like that, I think at times they kind of, I just, one last thing, and I know I keep going.
No, not at all. Go ahead.
Give this last thing. We lost this really hit home. And I was thinking about the interview during the week, and I said, like, I'm chatting to Orla and she talks to you about the dark days. what do you go with, or how do you? We lost an All Ireland semi-final in 2016 to Galway after extra time, and the next day we flew to Portugal with the kids. So we had it booked. I wasn't supposed to be going. So the night that we lost the match, we booked the flights for me. The girls were supposed to be going. But anyway, long story short, we went out to Portugal, and I was devastated. That's the word I used after the match. 2 points, extra time, a couple of refereeing decisions didn't go for us. And I was my opportunity to bring Dublin to an Ireland final, and I'd failed more or less, right? I blamed myself a lot for some of the decisions that I made. And I remember using the word devastation. And I never used that word again since 2016, because I read an article in those coming days. I think he was the Mayo ladies manager at the time, Frank Brown. And he wrote an article about devastation in sport, about how it wasn't conducive to normal life. So it was a case where we talk about being devastated after a match. He held his 6-month-old daughter, Emma, in his arms. She had pneumonia in a hospital and she died. And he held her in his arms. And that is devastation. Now, I've got my oldest girl is called Emma. And I remember sitting down reading that article and like nearly giving myself that kind of proverbial slap in the face to say, cop on, like, it's sport. That's not devastation. You know, you've brought these lads so far. Someone who will represent Dublin again. You know, the same ways. And that's something I need to improve on. So I don't use the word, definitely don't use the word devastation, because I think in life outside of the white lines, there's a reason for people to be devastated, and sport is not one of them. And if you can provide, like I said to you earlier on, the big thing for me is they won't remember what you won. They won't remember what you said, but by geez, they'll remember how you made them feel, you know.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I can't agree with that anymore. Out of interest, when I don't want to skim over the two brilliant games, the Wexford and the Laois game, but I want to ask you this: how do you prepare for a Kilkenny, a Galway? Like, how do you, in your own, even as a manager yourself, as individually, how do you prepare for a challenge like that?
It depends. Like, building up to a game, the big thing for me is about playing the game, not the occasion. So I'm a huge believer in, like, I said it publicly this year as well. Like, we were in 3 competitions. The first competition is nearly the one where you garner respect from your group. So we were in the Keogh Cup. They didn't qualify for the Walsh Cup because they weren't a Division 1 team. So we used that Keogh Cup to stick a few pins in them. Same way as when I went to Boden, you know, they'd be beaten in by, I think it was Lucan and Crumlin in the year previous. So when you go into a setup, you always have to have something to start off to get that bit of trust in the group, right? And we used the matches that we played this year probably more seriously than other teams, because it was a new management team. I wanted to create that culture of winning at the start, because I knew or expecting what was coming was going to be really, really hard. So when you're getting ready, I kind of feel that builds from your mantra from the first time you meet the players and your training, and you know yourself, and the mucky nights and the shite conditions. And like, a player recently asked me or said to me, you know, was there a science behind that? No, there's not, because I think to build character, you need that tough nights as well of training. There's no science behind it. There's no fancy with this guy with his pie charts or with his, you know, his live GPS fucking iPad. There's none of that. It's just hard work. And I think you see a lot about character then. And when you're getting ready for the big games, for me, look, your preparation has to be on point. You have to trust your team. It has to be process driven. Your process can't just start when you're playing Kilkenny. Like, our process obviously started as the year went on. You know, we had done the Keogh Cup. We'd come through a National League after winning Division 2. There was a little bit of a boost after, I suppose, the performance against Down. And then just, I didn't treat it really any differently, or if I'm being honest. I kind of go along the basis of, if we're playing 5 matches in the Leinster Championship, which we did this year, it's day 1 of 5. And I get my team ready for day 1. And when day 1 is over, day 1 is shelved. We do our analysis, we do our work-ons, we look at our improvements, we look at what we did well, and then we move on to day 2. And day 2 this year was a real kick in the arse for Westmeath, because we just didn't perform against Galway. Were we underprepared? I would say no. Was our mindset right? I would say no. I think in any team or in any aspect of life, the more you start thinking you're better than you are, the problems is when it kicks in. So, like, we spoke off air earlier on, like, when teams were coming up against Westmeath, or they're coming up against other teams in Ireland that mightn't be seen as a big team in football or hurling and you've got a game coming up. I think if the mindset, if it gets soft and they don't appreciate the opposition, and I remember Jim Gavin talking about this before, like everybody's treated the same. So we treated Galway the same way as we treated Laois. Did we make mistakes against Galway? Absolutely. Did we try and fix them before we played Laois? Yeah. So getting ready for that big game, it's controlling what you can do preparation wise. You know, it's all to me about playing that game and not the occasion. But it doesn't start in your All-Ireland final day. It shouldn't start for Orla on her All-Ireland semi-final day. It starts back last October, November, when you got back and you decided what your process was. And like I said, one thing I would say when I was working with Shane this year with just from a mind performance point of view, one thing that he would have tried, because he knows what I'm like, you talk about obsession earlier on, the last thing that Shane would say to me every night when he spoke to me was, sleep well, Joe, because I never did. But his phrase was, you know, the closest a man is to calmness, the closest he is to strength. So I think the big one for me is when the players feel that you've got your preparation done, that's all you can do, Orla. Like I didn't build, geez, we're playing Kilkenny next week, or what are we going to do now? We've got Dublin coming to Cusack. I dealt with them as games and not as occasions. As much as it was an occasion for them drawing with Wexford and the elation that it brought, it was all about a process moving on to the next game.
I love that. I even love the way you said.
Boring, but it's
but it is. It sort of is. Like I don't know what you find, but the process is boring. Like I don't know, but I think that's where you find success is in the boring. Like it's like there's a great quote Andy Friend said on the podcast: "Bored man gets paid." It's the boring stuff done over and over again is what's going to give you, like, you'd be paid off. It'd be paid dividends on game day. But I even love the way you said the days. Day 1, day 2. That reminds me, I think it might have been Jim Gavin, or it might have actually been Pat Gilroy, the 2011. It's the days, it's the process. What did you, out of interest, you mentioned? Yeah.
I just had a big thing. I got more into, like, maybe it was from Jim, or maybe it was from, I don't know, like Jim obviously has the military background and the experience. You always take a nugget. Like if somebody gets something from listening to a podcast or listening to this, or, you know, thinks Orla or Joe are talking shite, whatever it might be on a Friday morning. Like the big thing for me is the time to prepare for I got big into looking at what the Navy SEALs were doing and the ideas of how their mindset was so, like they never ever have left a man behind ever. Like or a woman. It's something that's, I find incredible when you think about that. But that one of their big things as well is that, like, the time to prepare for the operation was yesterday. So if you're getting ready for a game, it's not on, and I mean, like, obviously it's the wording of that. I don't mean yesterday, but I mean, I'm already thinking about what I may do come next January or February per se. And if that's with Westmeath, I know the parameters of success and what I would like to see as an ambition and an aim. It's like, and I had this conversation with someone recently, like, you know, sometimes you get people who go on these mad diets, you know, to lose a certain amount of weight, you know, and, like, you know, the gym will say to you, you know, if you can lose 10% body fat in 6 weeks, you can have 6 months free membership, you know. And I remember talking to a person recently and saying, like, there's a difference between an aim and an ambition. Okay, if you have an aim, you can fail. So our aims this year in Westmeath were to win the Kyo Cup, to get promoted from Division 1, and to maintain our status in they were our 3 aims that came from the players, that came from me. Okay. Now you can have an ambition as well, and your ambition might be to top one of the big players, or it might be to, you know, to really, you know, to beat a Wexford or beat a Kilkenny. That can be an ambition, but ambitions don't fail, in my opinion. I think ambition is something you can always have, and the same goes for, you know, when you talk about creating setups, be very careful sometimes about what you see, the difference between an aim and an ambition, because then all of a sudden, and it goes back to, like I said to you about Ballyboden, your aim was to win a county final, right? Your ambition was to win a Leinster, we'll say, or ambition may have been to win an All-Ireland, but you succeeded in your aims, and only one team can win in this sphere of that. And we love hurling, and it's a majestic game, and, you know, but at the end of every year, only one team per se can win a competition. And for Wexford or Dublin or Westmeath or Kilkenny, you know, what's deemed success? And at times, I'd love players and management teams to see the difference between having an aim and having an ambition.
I love that. What did you pick up? Is there anything specific you've picked up from Jim Gavin? He's come up a lot in the podcast. I'll have to get him on at some point if I can get the connection. But is there anything that you can really kind of take and attribute to him that you've said, geez, that's from Jim? I really like what he's said or brought in here.
We had Jim in a couple of times. Yeah, he was in, I think, maybe 3 times through the contact with Emer, obviously with Emer's work in the county board and that. Nothing except his aura of how he speaks to people. You know, when Jim spoke in the group, people listened. And his big thing, I suppose, was about becoming the story we tell ourselves. You know, that big thing that, you know, the mantra of where he wanted Dublin football to go at the time, and Dublin hurling. He was very vocal about how he would love to see Dublin hurling progressing as well. So it didn't necessarily take anything, like any one thing from him, but just the type of environment that he created, where it was player-led to a point. You know, it was always about facilitating the group, that he was there as a manager to manage a group of backroom staff, as well as 35 other people. And it was all about progressing, all under the image of why he wanted to do it for Dublin. And I suppose when that would be maybe one big thing that I would say that I've brought with me since I had those conversations, was that, you know, other managers will come and go in setups, but he showed a genuine care for what happened in that blue jersey for Dublin. And I suppose when I went to Boden in 18, I needed the players to know that as well, that if I'm going to do this, I expect compliance on the base. If I'm going to immerse my life into this, then I expect the same coming from ye. And look, Jim had massive success, you know, and he laid the foundations there for what came afterwards as well.
Exactly. I'm going to move on to Sideline 7. I'm just conscious of time. Joe, you have to come on again. We could talk about 4 hours here.
Next June. I don't want to see your name come over the phone till next June.
Brilliant. Sideline 7, it's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Question 1, what is your favourite quote? I feel like you're a good quotes man, are you?
Yeah, I am. I'm a big music man. I love music. I'm going to give you 2 quotes.
Yeah.
Last Sunday evening, I was at a concert in Malahide Castle, Gerry Cinnamon. And when I was out for a couple of runs this week, I was thinking, you know, if Orla asked me those weird 7 questions, what am I going to give her as a quote? So a quote from one of Gerry Cinnamon's songs is my first one for you. And that's, I'll say this right now, the hardest part of the game is not even playing the game. It's caring enough to care about the things that you're doing.
Okay,
that's
very
the
good.
first one for you. And my second one is one I got, like I said, from Shane this year. The closer a person is to calmness, the closer he is to strength.
I've actually written that down. I'm going to be using that probably
so
tomorrow. Absolutely. I'll give you full credit. I'm going to say to full credit, Joe Fortune. Look him up. Question 2. What's the best sporting event you've been to? And you can pick one as a supporter and one as one that you're involved in as a manager or player yourself.
Supporter. Not really specific, but my father-in-law, Dennis, is a huge GA fan and had tickets, really nice tickets in Croke Park for a long time. And I loved the kind of Sundays going in with himself in to see kind of, you know, All-Ireland finals, and he'd be coming out the gate as a Cork man and say, well, that's Kilkenny finished now anyway, that's them done. And then going back in the following year and realise Kilkenny just won it again. So I loved the days with him in Croke Park. It's hard, Orla, to pick one that I've been involved in, because I've, you know, this year was really special with Westmeath. You know, really special Westmeath, and then those Leinster finals with Dublin were great. The one that sticks in my head, if I'm thinking of a moment from a match, after we won the county final in 18, I remember at the time James Madden's dad had been quite unwell, and meeting his dad at the end of the match, at the end of the county final, unfortunately he's passed away since, but meeting his dad at the end of the county final was really special for me, because he was so proud of James, and I kind of went, you know, something, Jesus, you know, we're not doing too much wrong here, and it means so much to families to see. So I'm going to pick that as my favourite moment from a sporting event, if that's all right.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty powerful. Question 3, what's been the biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Setback. Maybe losing the final in 15. The match Kilkenny in 15, this was my first real year with intercounty management under 21, losing the last minute to Kenny, and then for John to pick up the phone, that kind of made me go, right, if I'm going to do this now, I'm going to leave no stone unturned. Like, you appreciate the phone call, especially a day after losing. There may have been other people at the time that didn't want me to get it, but I appreciated that call. But I swore to myself that night that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And we came back, obviously, the following year and won a Leinster title. So that's probably the biggest setback. It's probably it. Losing the, like, I think sometimes as well when you talk about setbacks, it's the one that sticks in your head that's most recent. Like this year as well, I think it was no harm that we lost to Down in the league, especially with some of the carry on that went on. I think it was no harm. It's the first time you talk with. Anyway, maybe we won't go down that line, but let's put down this one for what it is.
Okay, very good. Question 4, kind of on the flip side then, what's been your biggest achievement on or off the pitch?
Biggest achievement on the pitch, I'm going to go with the recent one. I think the recent one, what I've done with the resources that are available in regards to Westmeath, in comparison to other teams. They don't have a centre of excellence in Westmeath. As you saw yourself, we're in Abbottstown a little bit, and we're in various club pitches, and the people I have around me I'm so thankful for that. But I think on the basis of that, I'm going to go with this year because it's the most real one. The Boden one will always be special though. And then off the pitch, I have to say the 3 kids, the 3 girls, they're without doubt I'm so proud of the 3 of them. No matter where they end up or what they do or what they achieve, I'm really proud to be a dad there.
Are they all in Sylvester's, are they?
It's funny, and so many people ask me that. The youngest one is only 3.5, so she's nowhere yet. But Emma's the older girl. She's more into basketball. Abby's into basketball, gymnastics. I never pushed them towards that at all. Like, they did summer camps, but I think they're too pretty and nailed and all that kind of stuff. They just want to kind of, like, they love Niamh McAvoy and they love the girls Sinead and that are involved with Sills, but no, they just never really went, and I never pushed them. I'm not one of the dads who wants to live my life through my kids either. Like, if they want to do gymnastics or they want to do whatever they're happy doing, or I'm happy to bring them to.
Okay, brilliant. There's a great basketball set up in Malahide.
Yeah, and they love it. They absolutely love it, yeah.
Deadly. Question 5, looking back, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Stop worrying. I worry an awful lot about things, probably too much. Yeah, I'd probably go relax and stop worrying so much. Don't overanalyze the small things.
You've met your sister here. Question 6, who would be your dream dinner guest and why? You can open up the table to a few people if you want.
Dream dinner guests. I love a couple of different. I'd pick from I'm a big history person into history. I love history and I love the history of our country and where we're from. So I'd probably pick Michael Collins as somebody for somebody who had to go against some of his own in order to achieve what he wanted to do. I'd probably pick him. Roy Keane, is a big fan of Roy Keane and his ideas behind what setup should be like. I'd probably bring Jim Gavin as well, just to kind of extend that conversation a bit further. And I definitely bring my wife because I don't get to spend many dinners. So maybe when the 3 lads are finished, we've done the kind of, I don't know how you're going to do the setup, but I think, look, in order for me to achieve anything that I've achieved in management or sport or whatever, if I didn't have Annalisa behind me on the basis of her understanding what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I'll treat her to a meal on that. Okay. I don't know how she'd be happy with sitting beside Michael Collins, Gavin and Roy Keane, but I'll bring her anyway.
Brilliant. Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
I did think about this. A couple of months ago in Malahide, a lady passed away who was massively into, one of these people who puts up on their social media only 151 days to Christmas. And she was a huge family person, a huge person in Malahide, a significant job in Malahide in one of the schools. I taught one of her kids, and she passed away after being sick for a very short time. And I said to myself, coming out that day, thankful. I'm thankful now of what I've done, what I've achieved, what I'm looking forward to doing and what I'm looking forward to achieving. But I'm just thankful now for what I have after the couple of years we've had as a country and as a nation. And in my own family life and coaching career. I'm thankful for what I have. I'm not happy yet, but I'm thankful. So I'm going to call the chapter Thankful.
Brilliant. Joe, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And look, I have to get you on for part 2 because this is brilliant. I've picked up loads of nuggets, and very best of luck moving forward.
Thanks, man.
A massive thank you to Joe for joining me on the podcast today. I'm looking forward to part 2, and I just want to wish Joe the very best moving forward. If you are enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate if you leave a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as it does help the show grow. Massive thank you to Chin Up Goggles for their support in the coaching series, and as always, thank you for listening.